Hi everyone, welcome to Casual Watch Talk Sunday Social. I need to update. I've just realised I need to update my intro with the new logo. But anyway, I'm joined by a smaller but mighty panel today. So we're going to talk all about Seiko. So keep your questions coming. But let's kick it off with a wristwatch check. Dave, do you want to fire us off with a wristwatch check?
I was wondering what the fire it off. You've got to be careful with these British phrases, Sam. They've been very different things to different audiences.
Oh, I've not been.
So what am I wearing? Because we're talking about Seiko, I am wearing a little King Seiko. This is the boutique edition, which I don't know how purple it looks in this screen or not, but it's a kind of fumey purple colour. This is the 37mm one on their little multi-link bracelet, which personally I think for a 37mm watch wears quite well, quite long in the lug. But I've got a 17 centimeter wrist, so I think it looks pretty good on there. So yeah, that's what I am wearing.
Awesome. Todd, what are you wearing?
I am not wearing a Seiko. I'm enjoying. This weekend I've been wearing my Christopher Ward C60 GMT, one of the original 600-meter ones. I really love this watch, and I don't know why they're not making a GMT. I haven't seen a GMT on the new C60s in some time now. I've kind of been focusing on the Aquitaine, and I love this watch. This is a favorite of mine. It's permanent.
Yeah, I like it.
Nice.
And then I am wearing. I've been doing a day of filming, and I've been doing a lot of G-Shock. So I was wearing my vintage Grand MRG, one of the original ones from the late 90s. It's MRG 1-1-1. But yeah, so I've been doing a lot of it. Look out for some more G-Shock content coming very soon to the channel. So let's. The premise of today was that in our little group chat that we have going on this week, I was certainly lusting over the new King Seiko. It was announced this week, I believe, but it's not going to be available, I think, till July. And I think the one thing that stood out to me was actually how much this watch is going to cost. So it's retails for, I think this one's going to retail for $3,100 in the US. I'm based in the US, and that's for all the models. There is two that are going to go into normal production, which is actually there's three: the purple, the green, and this white one are all going to go into normal production. And then they've got a limited edition, which is a turquoise dial. That is not going to be any more expensive, but again, it's a Seiko limited edition, so it's probably going to be limited to 60,000. But
that few, that's quite a limited one. That one is.
Yeah, it's quite limited at 60,000. But I guess it made me think of the premise for this conversation, because I immediately went on Chrono24, and even though it's not released yet, there is Japanese sellers selling this for nearly $600 off what the retail price is. And it occurred to me that Seiko seems to have a real problem with their RRP prices. Either they seem way high, or there's like a delta between what they sell them for and what you can get them online for from Japanese sellers. So I thought it would make a good premise for an upload. And also, if you put something disparaging about Seiko in the title of a upload, a lot of people like to watch it and call you all sorts of names in the comment section. So we're here for it. I guess I'll do a round table to the panel then. Dave, I suppose I'll start with you. What Seiko pricing seems to be all over the place. Am I imagining it, or?
It depends. I mean, it's all over the place, I think, in 2 or 3 different ways. One is the kind of division between, say, Seiko, Grand Seiko. Okay, Credor's a little bit different. Let's just focus on Seiko and Grand Seiko. And even within Seiko itself, there's sub-brands, if you want to put it that way. You've got Prospects, you've got the kind of dressier stuff, you've got Seiko 5. There's lots of different kind of subcategories within there. And how they control it, I think, also varies very much by country. Some countries, like certainly in Europe, they tend to be a bit more careful about where they place certain things. So some of the Prospect stuff and things like that tends to get put into more selected outlets, shall we say, whereas some of the stuff gets dumped into the kind of mass market stores in the UK, things like Argos or John Lewis or the department stores, these kind of places, I guess, Macy's in the US, these kind of ideas. And outside of that, when you start dealing with those bigger retailers, price control, certainly within Europe, price control becomes much more challenging, shall we say, because those guys, if it doesn't work, the price just gets cut as well. So yes, it always has been, though. I don't think this is anything new, to be honest with you.
Yeah, their RRP never seems to mean anything at the street price. And by street price, I don't even mean secondary market or anything like that. Everybody, Long Island Watch, and he might be selling them at RRP now that I think about it. But most other retailers, it's always, even on the low end, your Seiko 5 comes out at $350. It's $259, at release day in the store. Like, I don't know why they put that on the website. Does anybody actually pay that price? Like, where does that come from? I have no idea. It's like a starting point, and we're going to test the market. I don't know.
I mean, I think it's as much to do with, Seiko, especially the low end, is a volume game. Like, that's all it is. They need to move a lot of watches, so they can't be quite as maybe discerning as they would like to be with where they put it. And the problem with that is that it's almost impossible to control the market in any true sense in regards to, if you want to sell the volume, you have to let certain players, shall we say, sell big volume of them at a discount, which kind of means that the price is a little bit all over the place. It also means, to be fair, that if you go hunting for something, you can usually find a pretty good deal, which is not necessarily a bad thing for the consumer. How good it is for the brand in terms of holding a kind of perceived value of the brand, that's something different.
Yeah, and I think that's an inherent problem right there. Like I love a King Seiko. No, not King Seiko. Yeah, the ones the like the dive watches that come out with the ceramic bezel and the sapphire, and they come out
like the SLA,
the King Turtle and King Samurai, and those come out at $525, but I bought it for $370 on eBay from a seller. It wasn't like a used guy. It was like a little shop, and I was like, yeah, that's a great price. I love that watch for that price.
No, I totally agree. And they obviously do sell them there's places where they sell them at the RRP. I went to the flagship store in Ginza, in Tokyo, where Seiko started, and their entire store, it was weird because when I was doing the yen conversion, they were even more expensive than what they were available in the US in the store. And I inquired about a few of them, tried them on a few of them, and nobody was offering like a discount or anything when you were there, when you were looking seriously at them. So there is outlets where they do sell them at their RRP, but you can just simply do a Google search, and it's not even like you have to go, further afield to find them. It seems like if you want it on the day of launch, perhaps you'll pay RRP, but if you wait a little bit, then typically you can find them for much cheaper. I think I had another example, this new GMT, this SPB 381, which retails for 1,500 on their website. But this isn't sponsored by them, but Sakura watches, which I bought quite a few of, say $300 difference. Now, there's a chance you'd have to pay import into the US because this is coming from Japan, but I think they offer like free postage, or the postage is very affordable. So, and that's just doing a simple Google search for a lot of them. And this is the thing with this King Seiko. I feel like even the other thing with this is I feel like even at what they're going on Chrono 24 for might be a little over what I want to pay for it, because this movement, this 6L35 that's in them, they have released this before in let me just find it, in a I think it's a cocktail time one, or a Presage one. They released it in a Presage, and that was I think it was under 2,000 when they released it in the Presage. So that's the other thing with their movements, isn't it? I think sometimes their numbering system is confusing if you're not used to it, because they've got like a 6R, 6L, 8R, no, they haven't got an 8R, they got an 8L. So I think it's hard as a new user to work out.
Yeah, I mean, I think broadly speaking, if it's a 4, if it begins with a 4, it's usually relatively low end. If it's 6, it sits in the middle. If it's 8, the story that always used to do the rounds was if it was an 8 something, it was Grand Seiko level. That's stretching it a little bit. The very best of the 8s that are used in some of the very high end releases from Seiko might give the 8 series movements from Grand Seiko a run for their money, but there's a lot of other 8 releases in Seiko that are not particularly well finished, maybe not regulated to the same degree as what you would find in a Grand Seiko. But then I think people get a bit hung up sometimes with Seiko and Grand Seiko and say, oh, well, if you go above 3,000-4,000 in a Seiko, why would you not just buy a Grand Seiko? Well, they look very different. It's a very different pitch as far as I'm concerned. I like both of them, but Grand Seiko is definitely a bit more dressy as a general rule. It's got a more kind of refined finish as a general rule, I would say as well. But if you want a proper hardcore, really good quality tool watch, then Seiko at their premium price points can satisfy if you want that out the box, just a hardcore tool watch with a nice kind of horological spec to it as well. You don't get that in Grand Seiko as far as I'm concerned. None of their watches I would really class as a proper tool watch.
Mm-hmm. I actually agree with you. I bought 2 Grand Seikos last year, as everyone knows, and they seem more quirky. They seem more specialized in Seiko cases in their normal range. You very rarely get a bad Seiko case. They seem to have a lot of thought that put into them, their wearability, whereas both the Grand Seikos I had, it seemed like the wearability of them was almost a secondary. And I don't know whether that was because the spring drive movement was more or heavier, but it seemed they were trying to purposely cater to less people, and I don't. That's the vibe I got from it anyway. That's why I didn't really warm to them.
I think for me, Grand Seiko are playing a similar game to Rolex. Say, Rolex in theory is a tool watch, a Submariner or whatever, but is it really a tool watch anymore? Probably not. I don't think you would really categorize. Yes, okay, the odd person buys one and uses it as it was meant to be used, but 99.9% are. It's a premium, well-finished luxury watch. And I think even the dive watches from Grand Seiko fall into that. Whereas they do some pretty solid utilitarian watches in the Seiko branding.
Yeah.
And here's the thing that I'm glad Pete's not here because he'd be right irritated as soon as I say this. And it's going to be about the accuracy. Now, what's a challenge, I think, for Seiko, your 4 hours are what? Plus 35, minus 45 per day or something like that. The 6R, which is a premium jump up, it's not a whole lot better, right? It's like minus 25 plus 35 or something. It's like an incremental jump for a larger chunk. And then I don't know what point it goes like, oh, okay, now we have Rolex tolerance. Other than spring drive.
Yeah, I think it only does spring drive because if we look at that the 6L35, they're saying plus 15 to minus 10. I mean, that's where Kosk is like Kosk plus 4 to minus plus 4 to plus 6 to minus 4.
Plus 6 minus 4. Plus 6 minus 4.
And this is a $3,000 watch, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So that's where you're like, I want that movement to perform at $3,000.
Yeah, it seems floppy, doesn't it?
Yeah,
that's always probably been one of their weaknesses. Is that said? Remember, there's an awful lot of Swiss watches at 3,000 as well. That let's say they're not cost standard.
No,
there's an awful lot of stuff like that out there as well. I think Seiko are just it's that Japanese kind of classic Japanese thing is they're very open and honest, and actually they tend to err on the side of caution rather than the kind of side of over accuracy, which means that, to be fair, no one can ever take one back and say, oh, this isn't running to standard. Whereas there's more than one Swiss brand does fall foul of the, oh yes, it's going to run to minus 4 plus 6, and at the minute it runs at plus 7, somebody's on their case saying this is out of spec, I want you to send it back and fix it.
Yeah.
So I think there's a degree of that. The vast majority of Seiko watches I've ever played with, the decent ones anyway, they run pretty well. They're well within the tolerances of what they say they are. They're just playing it super safe. And of course, you can regulate them as a general rule. So therefore, if you want to get it down to pretty good accuracies, you can. So I think they've just got a different approach to it to the Swiss.
Yeah, I think
that's a fair statement. And everybody I know that's true. That like it runs pretty accurate. It's just sort of when I'm buying it and I'm looking at the paper, I'm like, oof.
Yeah. I think actually this accuracy thing from my, I can only speak from my experience, but I think actually on the, you know, the I think I had one that was in the 6R, and I've definitely had the 4Rs in loads of different ones. They might be accurate, but their positional accuracy when you put them on a time grapher can be way off. It's not like they can hold a consistent, like a Swiss movement. You know, if it's +7, you turn it on its side, it's going to be like +7 or +8. But the ones that, and we've done a video on the channel about this, the positional accuracy of a Seiko movement, turning it on its side. So I always find it funny when people, especially if I do Seiko video, like, oh, I've got a whatever, an SKX that runs at +2 seconds a day. It's like, okay, we'll put it on a time grapher and turn it on its side, and I think you'll find that actually the positional accuracy is it's not.
But this is a very different topic, and actually this might be a good topic for one point. Is an awful lot of people fundamentally don't understand the difference between laboratory-based timing figures, a la 5-positional that you would get off of COSC, for example, and the real world, and they are very, very different things. You know, you can regulate a watch to within a parameter. That doesn't actually mean necessarily that watch is going to even remotely run to that, depending on how you wear it, where you wear it, what you do with it. It could be miles out from what the figure says. And you can take exactly the same watch and put it back into the test bench, and it'll still run within certified limits, but it won't when it's on the wrist of a individual doing a certain thing. And it depends how you want to view that. That's a very different topic. And people get very hung up about what a time grapher tells them versus the use in real world. It's a bit like fuel efficiency figures in a car. The brand can tell you all day long how many miles per gallon that car will do. Good luck sometimes trying to get it to do that in the real world.
The positional accuracy is interesting too when you say that, Dave, because that's something I've experimented with one of my daily watches. Is that if when I wear it and sleep with it, it's losing time at a greater speed than if I take it off and let it rest at night on my nightstand. It's almost perfect, and so it averages out, but depending on use. You're right.
And actually, that's the magic phrase. You know, those figures are all averages of multi-positions over a given time frame. They're not snapshots, you know. And that's a very different subject.
And it's I've got a time grapher, but I'm going to include I'll include a clip in a Braymont video that I'm doing, but I never use the time grapher in a watch review because new watches, they have a breaking in period, don't they? Like my Braymont was running at +8 seconds a day, even though I thought it said chronometer certified on the dial, which I thought was COSC, but it's not. There's an ISO standard that can also be it was like ISO something. It's got a chronometer on the back, but it's not a COSC certification. It's an ISO standard they've measured it to. Anyway, it was at +8, and then
interesting because to have chronometer certified or chronometer standard on the watch, in theory it has to have gone through COSC.
Yeah, do you
certainly for a Swiss made watch. So
this is maybe this is a topic for another time, because I thought that, but the certificate is not a COSC certificate. It's ISO 3000. Somebody will know in the chat. It's like an ISO standard, and when I looked into it, it's an ISO standard that is about maintaining accuracy over several days, not that it is within a COSC boundary. And mine was running at +8, and I was gonna ring them back up and say, that's weird. It should be within COSC. But then I looked through the paperwork. But actually, it's got better because I threw it on a time grapher during the review to show it, and it's actually at +3 now. So it's actually got better the more that I've worn it, which it sounds odd.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, at the end of the day, all of these numbers actually I see them as completely irrelevant. If you buy a watch and you wear it, and when you're wearing it doing what it should do, and it holds good time, then as far as I'm concerned, that's kind of all that you should ever ask of a watch.
Yeah.
Doing this theoretical, how I leave it on my bedstand, crown down, face up, face down, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't have any real impact. It should be all down to how it wears. I would much rather have a watch that has got really bad figures if you put it on a time grapher, but when you wear it, it's got super nice accuracy. That's much more practical than the other way around. But weirdly, people get hung up on I've put it on a million different time graphers to time it, and it's out. Well, what's it like when you wear it? Oh yeah, it's good, but I'm not happy because it's out when I put it on a time grapher, and it's like, oh, I give up.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I get a little bit of OCD about it, but to be honest, if it was really bothering me, I would only ever buy quartz watches. So, but
Exactly. Yeah.
We've got a couple of good comments and questions. So Brassic Time says, I feel Seiko is positioning MSRP so high because they expect discounts down to the price they actually envisaged. So this is a weird one because there was, I don't know whether this was an actual real policy from Breitling, but there was a feeling, wasn't there, from Breitling that they did this for a while and that you could get them on the grey market for like 30% less. But they actually put a stop to that, didn't they? Or at least the perception of that.
I would doubt extremely that any brand would deliberately, certainly any of the modern watch brands, is that they're not upmarking them, expect them to be discounted. They all hate the idea of the watch has been discounted. It is a fact of reality for some of the brands, to be honest, but that's more about their lack of control of their retail distribution network because they want to move volume, and that sometimes leads to decisions that they're getting put into places that they ordinarily wouldn't want to do it. But remember, as a general rule, if it's being marked down, it's the retailer that's taking the hit, not the brand. The brand will have agreed a margin with the retailer. They sell it to the retailer at a price, and the retailer has to sell it at that retail price or that suggested retail price if they want to make their margin. If they decide to make less margin, as some retailers do, within their rights if they want to, it's them that take the hit, not the brand.
Yeah, it's so Chrono Craze is saying here, forget the time grapher and specs on paper. The only measurement for watch accuracy is what matters is when it's on your wrist. Yeah, that's a very good point.
Yep.
And then I used to back in the day used to work for an Apple Mac reseller, and this was even before the iPod. It was that long ago, and actually, their Apple was so rightly so precious of their retail price that the discount was a rebate, and the rebate depended on what you so we had like a workshop there, so that was like and it was not a big percentage that we got, but because we had like a workshop, you got a little bit extra. Because we had a storefront, we got a little bit extra. Because we had to keep our Apple certificates, our Apple Product Professional it was called at the time, so we had to maintain those. All the staff had to have it, so they kept that tight based on a rebate.
That's a common thing. I mean, the other thing is, remember, there's a huge difference between how US retail operates and how European retail operates, especially when it comes to, US is very business centric, not so much consumer centric. Europe is almost the opposite way around. It's very pro-consumer. Not, I wouldn't say anti-business, but the consumer has much more rights than you would have in the US when it comes to everything else. Retailers can also sell whatever they want. A brand can dictate all they want about what you should sell it for. But like you mentioned there, Sam, the Apple trick, they were the masters of it. How to make sure you get your margin. Don't give it all away up front and tell them if they behave themselves, inverted commas, you get a marketing rebate. It's the classic loophole, how to get around the price fixing argument.
And Treble says here, Braymont must be struggling, not sure seeing anyone in the Manchester store. When I went back to, I'm going to be visiting again, but I'm from Manchester. The last time we visited, the most surprised I was that there was a Braymont store there. Actually, it was on the same location as. Do you remember when EasyJet had the Easy Internet cafes? There used to be an Easy Internet cafe there. Now it's a Braymont store. But yeah, I think not that this is a Braymont thing, but I'll say this in the review that I release this week. I love that Braymont watch, but their RRP is way beyond what I think the actual watch is. Certainly the one I have, what I think its actual value to me is. So James Duffy says, as watch nerds, we have a tendency to compare new retail priced apples with 5-year-old grey market oranges.
To a degree.
There is a lot of that goes on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Like Gavin's
yeah,
comment.
I mean, Mark's making the obvious point there, isn't he? If you're in a buy a quartz watch, which is what I said.
Yeah, well, fair enough.
So Gavin says
my quartz watch is going to be much cheaper than that 6-hour movement.
Yes. Well,
it depends who you're buying the quartz from. If you go down the FP quartz route, you're not getting much change.
Well, yeah, and the Grand Seiko quartz, the 9F, that arguably, and the Citizen,
or Zero Perigo. There's plenty of premium quartz out there.
Fair enough.
Well. Oh yeah, and you know, Omega did quartz for a while there, didn't
Still
they?
do.
Yeah, in the ladies' watches, yeah.
And
actually,
X33,
Aquaterra.
The
the X33.
X33, yeah, still there. Quartz,
yeah, that's $5,000 watch, isn't it? Gavin says at least they're not as bad as Invicta with their discounts. Well, actually, you know, this is actually a very good point, Gavin, that you weren't making, but I'm going to make it. The Invicta Pro Diver arguably is probably the best value Seiko that you can buy, because it has the NH35A in it, like a really good case design, quite a nice bracelet on there, and you can get them for like less than $100. It's like one of the best bargains in the whole watch world. Is, I mean, it cheekily looks a bit like a Submariner for sure, but they do different styles. But that's probably the best if you're starting off in watches. That Invicta Pro Diver, the mechanical with the NH35A in it, with their signed rotors, probably the best bargain that you can get.
And speaking of it, I just went down another rabbit hole on a watch group that I'm in. Some guy posted a picture because his daughter bought him an Invicta, and it was a very nice looking ceramic case Invicta. It's $55, and I was like, no one's doing a ceramic case for $55.
There's like crazy photos, isn't there, of like the original Baselworld, and like Invicta was like one of the flagship brands there, weren't they? Before they got bought by the American conglomerate or whatever. But
Invicta, though, are like the opposite of all watch brands. They make terrible watches, but if you make enough bad watches, at one point you're going to make a reasonable one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's some horrific watches. They make some.
But I tell you what,
watches you ever saw.
You're more like, other than Rolex, I think that you're more likely, certainly in Florida, you're more likely to see an Invicta in the wild than you know, a normal Seiko, I would say.
I see more Invictas, I think, around here as well than any other watch brand.
Yeah, so actually, this is interesting comment. So Thelonious Monk says, I think a bunch of the price increases from brands like Seiko have created this thriving micro brand industry. Half of the allure with Seiko, in my opinion, is affordable. I'm not sure. Go on, Dave. I've got comments on this as well.
Yes and no. There's a fundamental difference. So you've got to remember, Seiko, along with most of the well-known watch brands, their business model is all via ADs. So whatever you think about it, it is twice the price as a rule that it could be or might be if they sold directly. And that's because, quite rightly, if the retailer is part of the chain, they want to make a margin. They want to pay the bills, their overheads, their staff, their shop, everything else, and customer service. If most microbrands, in fact, nearly all of them without fail, are direct to market and work on quite slim margins, that is always going to lead to a watch that, on the face of it, is spec for spec, broadly the same as models you can compare in retailers at maybe 30, 40, even 50% less money. It's a very different business model. So I don't think they can really be compared. You know, there's the odd new brand. Like if we think about Nick at Fears, you know, I know Nick at Fears when he started, it was all direct, but he very much had in his head, he wanted to go into retail stores over time. He wanted to build an AD network. He wanted to have his own store, etc., etc. He knew he couldn't do that from day one, but he priced and modeled his entire price catalog of his product around knowing that that's where he wanted to go. And that led to initially some folk going, is that a bit expensive? Is that a bit expensive? Maybe it was, but if he didn't do that, he would have no chance of ever doing what he's done now, which is have quite a nice retail network out there. He just couldn't, because quite rightly, a retailer, an AD, isn't going to work for nothing. And A, why should they? And B, if they work on slim margins, they won't survive and they won't be there. And you won't be able to walk up your high street and look at watch shops because they'll all be gone. So there is a little bit of, you've got to be careful what you wish for. If you want to wish for bargain basement prices, don't be surprised when there's not that many places either stocking them or existing anymore to sell them.
Yeah, I think this as well. I mean, my thoughts on this is, and Thelonious, definitely let us know in the comment section. I think a bunch of brands that people think are micro brands are not micro brands is my first feeling, because I get contacted by a lot of them, and also the ones that are affordable, that offer good value, either struggle to keep watches in stock or they struggle to keep going. I think a lot of micro brands actually that offered some of the best value are no longer around, and certainly ones that you think are micro brands, they either have it. So I'm trying to think of an example here, because a lot of the micro that people think are micro brands, I don't think are micro brands anymore. But
No,
let us know.
they're not. They never were. They're
Yeah.
in many cases they're Hong Kong based or China based factories that have a whole ream of different brands, and they bang out watches. Simple as that.
Yeah.
Are they a micro brand? They're not a micro brand in the same way as, say, someone like Rich at Studio Underdog. One guy who just goes, do you know what? I'm going to do it myself. I'm going to buy bits from different places and put watches together. That's a micro brand in the truest sense, I guess, of the definition. They're a micro business and a micro brand. Someone like lots of them that people call micro brands are pumping out tens, if not hundreds of thousands of watches a year. That ain't a micro brand. It's not a micro business either, because these are big factories.
Yeah, and they're definitely, if you're looking at the independents, should we say, or the small, I don't know what you would call them, but the independent watch brands like Phoebus, for example, that offers amazing value, but that is not a micro brand. They offer amazing. Spinnaker is another example, isn't it? They offer fantastic value, but they are pumping out a lot more watches than I think ones that we traditionally would think as.
I think Seiko's
another
success
example,
is one of the best things for the micro brand industry, only that they are doing all the innovation when it comes to the movements.
Yeah.
And these micro brands are able to, like, oh, I'm going to get that movement for $35, and now I've got this great watch, and let me throw a sapphire crystal on it that Seiko doesn't, and the buyer goes, oh, now I'm getting more for my money, and it draw, because that's one of the reasons I do like Phoebus. Like, you're like, I'm getting a Seiko movement, and with upgrades,
and it's not
exactly.
a homage to anything. Or
I mean, you see that comment there from Thelonious that I think you just flashed up there, right? So I think this explains it perfectly. If that movement is, say, circa 25, 30 wholesale, and the watch sells for 400, that perfectly adds up. You think, okay, so the movement's 25. Think about all other bits: case, crystal, dial, hand, bracelet, yada yada, packaging, all that stuff. So let's say they make a watch, and in total the watch costs 100. Let's say that sounds fair, doesn't it? You know, the movement's the bigger part of it, 25. The time you add everything else together, including boxing, packaging, shipping, everything, let's say 100. So it costs them 100. They want to sell it to a wholesaler. So what do? You double it roughly. So it's 200. They then sell it to a retailer. What does a retailer do? Double it, 400. Bob's your uncle. So that's exactly why it's 400. That is just basic retail economics. That's why it's 400. That doesn't come as a surprise in any way. If you cut out the retailer and sell it direct, maybe you could sell it for 200. And there are plenty of small micro brands do that. But if they wanted it to be widely available through ADs, it'd be 400 as well. Simple as that.
Yeah, and the other thing as well, which I think is interesting, I've got to do a shout out, and they're not a micro brand, they're an independent brand. But happened to be in Dallas for work this week, and I stopped in and saw Peter at Jack Mason, and he, their evolution for what they are now. Before they were very much I would say a fashion brand. They probably wouldn't like me saying that, but I would say their earlier watches were like, they had a certain look to them that looked like, you know, a mass market. But now they've gone to the Strato Timer and this Diver, where they've got the very individual designs to them, the bracelets. But what he had this draftsman's chest of drawers with the shallow drawers, and he was pulling out row after. I was so grateful at the time, but row after row of just trays of watches that were all prototypes, or ones that never came to market, or ones where they had to tweak, or ones where, and he does the designing himself. He's not paying somebody to do the designing, but it just shows you that the investment that has to go into even these smaller production watch companies with the prototyping and the design.
Oh,
and you know,
as you know, I do know. I'm not going to be specific about it, but it is eye-wateringly expensive to get into the watch game if you want to do it. If you want to do it properly, if you want to get into actually doing your own movements, you better have deep pockets because it hurts a lot.
Yeah. So let's have a we've got some other great comments coming here.
Well, this is a new one. This Cedar.
Oh yeah,
one,
Cedar Canoe.
That
It's been thanks for comments, Cedar.
Sure.
Cedar's been with the channel for a long time. You've been a subscriber for a long time, so welcome. So yeah, big brands seem to have greedy habits, and they raise their yearly much more than inflation. Why Omega, Longines, Hamilton have gone up in price much. Brand image and brand placement in marketing.
That doesn't seem to be an answer other than maybe greed.
Yeah, I mean, these are big beasts. You know, these are big multinational, multi-million, if not higher, turnover businesses, and they are hungry for money. It's as simple as that, you know. And they have huge marketing budgets that they need to fulfill to get all of the brand imagery that you want and to perceive, and you pay for it. And you know, most of the high street big businesses that are owned by the luxury houses, whether that's Swatch Group, whether that's LVMH, whether that's Richemont, they are, as a general rule, pretty money hungry businesses. And it's not just their watch side, it could be their, you know, whether it's Louis Vuitton, whether it's Balenciaga, or any of the other multitude of brands that they own as well. These they need to create a lot of money. They need to create a lot of profit because they've got big overheads. They've got lots of people, very expensive stores generally as a rule. You know, these big high street stores in Bond Street in London and all of these places, they don't come cheap. And they've got a lot of staff, but they also like to make a huge amount of profit. And yeah, so that's basically, you've nailed it on the head. You can call it greed, but yeah, that's what it is. That's unfortunately the world of the reality of the luxury industry. They want to make money.
Well, it's part of the, it's a spillover of that COVID effect that we're still seeing even at the grocery store. At first it was, we're having supply chain issues. But then people kept buying them and they're like, oh, well, I guess people are comfortable with this price. Let's just keep going.
It's like luxury theater, isn't it? It's like, especially Omega, where Omega was, you know, there was a time not so long ago where engineers wore Omegas, and you could tell straight away, couldn't you? Oh, this is somebody in engineering. They had that very tool watch specific, you know, like these.
You mean people like Mark? People like Mark, because he's not on today. People like Mark.
Yeah, he's not on today. But yeah, like, you know, the old joke with like Saab was that, you know, architects always used to drive Saabs.
Saab and
Omega
Volvo
had that very, very. But they've had to do this kind of step up in perception of luxury, I think, haven't they? This kind of luxury theater, where they've added. But I mean, it's got them to the second. You know, they've been the second for quite a while, haven't they? Although Cartier might have taken them over recently, but.
I mean, you know, let's not kid it on. The big luxury houses, what are they there for? To make money. You know, the families that own these businesses aren't billionaires because they give stuff away. You know, they are greedy and they've got deep pockets. That's the reality of it. You know, watches is a weird place because you can get everything from amazingly good value, and actually most of the micro brands and most of the small brands actually underprice themselves, because they feel that they have to offer absolutely stellar value for money in order to get some traction. The problem most of them have is that long term, if they want to actually survive, they need to actually make some more money to pay for innovation, to pay for something a little bit different, to go down a more bespoke route that's not just, okay, I'll buy that case and I'll buy that and I'll put a watch together. People expect more and more of them over time. The problem is most of them actually make it difficult for themselves because they pitch themselves in maybe a little bit too aggressively priced to begin with, and then struggle to get out of that hole that they've dug themselves, to be honest.
Yeah, because that's the thing, isn't it? Because and maybe this is a question for the panel, is the during COVID, not only did we see a price increase, but we very much saw brands drawing a line in the sand. Braymont comes to prime example, because somebody mentioned about a cruise ship, about Invictus on a cruise ship.
Oh, yeah.
But cruise ships used to be where you used to get a bargain on a watch, and I went on a cruise. That's where I bought my Braymont, which I did get a bargain on. But the other brands, they were like, these are not discounted. Braymont, Breitling was one, Hublot was the other, and even when you went on to put into port and you went into Diamonds International, which is always like a little bit of a haggle, they were like, we cannot discount Breitling unless it's a model that is no longer made. It's it's an out of production model. So I wonder if their perception where you could get a deal on them. I'm making a counter to my previous argument, but anyway. Whether if there is a downturn in the watch industry, whether they back themselves into a corner or whether they'll just sort of start discounting.
The problem with some of these brands, Omega is a heavily industrialized business. It's a factory that needs fed. There's lots of staff, lots of people, lots of skilled workers, and the stuff goes in one end and comes out the other. It is a manufacturing business. It's much like a car plant in many ways. These things are mass produced on an industrial scale, and they need to be pushing them through at the other end. They have to be careful. At the moment, there's a lot of downturn. People are a bit poorer than they were because the cost of everything, unfortunately, has gone up. Food's expensive, fuel's expensive, power's expensive. Everything has got more expensive for a multitude of reasons. But, most of the developed world, everything's got expensive recently compared to where it was. And people have got less money to spend on watches. We don't want to go back to the days where I think it was, who was it actually? Was it Cartier? It was one of the big luxury houses got absolutely taken to task because they had so much of old inventory in stores that they pulled a lot back. And if you remember, they were destroying it. And
Louis Vuitton.
It was Louis Vuitton. Yeah, they got called out, didn't they? And that didn't go down well in this kind of day and age of kind of sustainability and kind of being careful what you do with resources. So these brands have, in some cases, scaled back production. I know in Switzerland a few factories and a few brands that have laid off quite significant numbers of watchmakers again, like significant numbers. And some of them have gone on to part working. So they're only doing 3 days a week instead of 5 days a week. So they've let people go and they've pulled back working so that they produce less to put less into the market because it's that significant in terms of the downturn. And it's not even so much the US and Europe, it's China. The Chinese market has, for all intents and purposes, collapsed.
Yeah.
It's interesting. It's a challenging proposition because now we're talking about luxury watches, and I think there's a weird divergence that's happening. You're right. There are a lot of people who are struggling now, but there also seems to be there's just a huger gap now. Huger is not a real word, but there's a larger gap now, and there are a lot of people who are multi-millionaires now, and a lot of people who are that middle gap has gone away. And I saw a statistic recently, something about the number of millionaires per capita, like in New York City, and multimillionaires. It's obscene. You're like, how is this happening when it seems like so many people? And in luxury, I feel like they're going to keep pushing there and pushing there. But the problem with companies like Seiko is they don't have that luxury perception. And there's this other version of the quartz crisis coming along with the smartwatches, where the smartwatches are outselling all of them collectively, and the people who are priced in this $500 to $1,500 range could be in real trouble long term, because luxury is a different thing. All these millionaires are going to line up and fill a safe full of Rolexes and Cartiers and Breitlings, and they'll be fine. They don't care.
Yeah,
but this market of Seiko is, I feel like, in danger.
Yeah, and you're seeing a lot more very wealthy people wearing Apple Watches, don't you? I certainly see a lot more of it when because I travel quite a bit. But yeah, I mean, Gavin says here, Omega used to be the true affordable luxury, but it seems those days are almost gone. And I agree, but I think also Swatch, they didn't have like a Rolex in the bag, did they? They needed like a Rolex on their roster.
Yeah, I think the main difference is Omega took a very conscious decision to reposition themselves in the market. Simple as that. They decided they wanted it to be the Rolex of the Swatch group, so to speak. and they upped their game in many respects, and they have put a lot of money into materials, into different products, into movements, etc., and they have lifted their prices. Sure, I think arguably probably now Longines are the Swatch Group's equivalent of where Omega were 10 years ago.
It's a shame because I would love to. I would have. I would love to add another Speedmaster and stuff like that to the collection, but I just can't. I can't just fathom it in my head because even on the pre-owned market, they're still very high, aren't they? Because those Aquaterras, you could get them on Joma Shop for like $1,500. You could get a real bargain because they were pumping out all sorts of different variations and everything. And even my favorite one, the Bumblebee one, the 15,000 Gauss, that you could get for a bargain. And I'm kicking myself that I didn't buy one when they were like 2,000 or 3,000 because now they're in the 4,500 to 5,000 pre-owned. So, Brassic Time says in the 1970s you could buy an Omega in Argos. I don't remember that one.
Times have changed. Although, bear in mind, 1970s was 54 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, my dad bought his Omega Speed Timer that I've had on the show for $170 in the 1970s. Secondhand.
And also, anyone that wanted and had the money to buy themselves a Submariner could buy one as well. How things have changed.
That's the thing. The amount you see more vintage subs and vintage Datejust than you see new Rolex, don't you? Because I mean, a testament to Rolex that they last so long, but a lot of the people that wear them have had them for a long time. This is what I think about a lot that like CWC and a lot of the military brands is that they definitely are using that military history to inflate their prices, but they would never have had that military history if they were expensive at the time. Like the MOD wouldn't have been like, oh, I'll pay 300 quid a piece for a G10 CWC G10 at the time.
But it's the bigger argument of probably in the last 10 years what is luxury? The definition of luxury has materially changed. If you went back to the 70s, 80s, 90s, the only folk that could afford true luxury were the ultra wealthy. And, there's an awful lot of people now who probably realistically, I hate social classing and all this, but, people who are in, let's say, the kind of upper working class into the middle class in terms of, income, etc., are now buying watches, and not just one or two of them, probably 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them, that in the 70s and 80s they would be lucky if they got one when they retired. It's a different world. People spend money on luxury that didn't happen 30 years ago.
Yeah, and that's the shame about Rolex, because Rolex used to always be the graduation or the retirement or the anniversary present, didn't it? And they've probably a long gone now. I don't think there'll be many people in.
Exactly. You maybe got like a nice watch for your 21st or for your graduation, and then probably the gold watch was your retirement gift. That's probably as much as it went, and that wasn't for everyone. That was for some people.
Yeah, I was reading something as well about the truly very wealthy, like the billionaires. They're actually going the opposite way and wearing a lot of unbranded stuff, and they're wearing they're doing this stealth wealth, aren't they? Whereas it's the people that are in the middle that are buying the Gucci and stuff like that because they're sort of and Rolex because they don't have the perception of wealth, but the actual truly wealthy are kind of going the other way. Like Bill Gates is a classic example, isn't it, with his Casios and his Seiko.
So was Steve Jobs, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Steve Jobs was hardly poor. He was hardly poor when he passed away, but what did he wear? Just a pretty basic watch, didn't he? He didn't wear anything fancy.
Yeah, jeans and his polo shirt and his Seiko. Yeah, his turtleneck.
Yeah.
And his Seiko,
although he has quite a nice yacht, it has to be said.
Yeah. What a great I think those tech guys, those early pioneers like Steve Jobs, sort of did that sort of stealth wealth type of thing. Let's so
that's a fair point that Alexander makes as well. But
look, true.
Credit is much more widely available now than it was in the 70s.
Well, it was when money was cheap, and the thing is, actually during COVID, before COVID, during COVID, and just after COVID, money was about as cheap as it's been in a long, long time. You know, you could get interest-free loan for 2, 3, 4, 5 years pretty much on any watch you wanted, certainly in Europe. Money's suddenly got expensive again, though, which is part of the reason why sales are dropping, because it's eye-wateringly high how many of these premium watches are not paid for at point of purchase in the traditional sense, shall we say.
Yeah, because I don't think Rolex does like a payment plan, do they? I mean, I guess you'd have to.
I think that's one
can't
of the few
imagine.
brands that, but the thing is, they don't have to. You know, like
Yeah.
if you think about it, like if it's an interest-free loan, who's paying the interest? It's not a case of no one's paying interest. The retailer's paying it for you, so it's an effective form of discount, and it costs them money. Why would they give you interest-free loan on a watch when they could sell it and someone will just
Yeah.
pay cash or credit card anyway? Of course, they're
Yeah,
not going to
yeah.
offer it.
I have to say I mean, I've always liked the Rolex store in Orlando. They've always been really nice, but they've doubled the size of that store, and it's open now. It's the one in the Mall of Millennia, and they're always very welcoming in there. They're not like standoffish with you, and they're always asking you, you know, even though they haven't got a lot of the watches there. But let's have a look. So here we go. Here, there. This is an interesting point. So Citizen is the new Seiko. I've found a lot of value in Citizen lately. I mean, I've just reviewed that integrated sports watch, the new Forza. That was great
That
value.
watch is gorgeous. Good looking watch for the price. Titanium too.
Yeah, I totally agree. Citizen's always been the little underdog. You know, they're a big, don't get me wrong, they're huge, especially in Japan. They're not exactly a small company by any stretch of the imagination, but compared to Seiko in the watch sphere, especially in Europe and in the US, they significantly lag behind where Seiko and Grand Seiko is at in the market position. But they have got some exceptionally good value watches.
Yeah, and I think they've been a lot more experimental recently, haven't they? I mean, there was definitely a period, sort of early 2000s, where they were very just like not industrial looking, but they had that look to them, didn't they? That the Citizen, sort of the
It was
eco
quite an
drive.
agricultural design in many cases.
Yeah,
there wasn't a lot of refinement to it.
Exactly. They looked very much like a sort of like a sports cologne type of in a watch.
Yeah. If you dig around in their collection, you start to see some too that feel a little like a cooler version of an Invicta too. Like they have such a broad spectrum.
There's some bad ones.
Yeah.
But they've always done, you know, like their field watches. They've got some cracking little field watches. The Series 8 that they did over the last couple of years looks like a bit more of a serious push into trying to do something a little bit more unusual. Obviously, with them buying La Jouperet as well, you know, that's giving them some kind of input into that more premium market as well. Although
and they have Frederic Constant as well, didn't they? As part of the group.
Absolutely. And they've got a few different brands. You know, they've got Arnold and Son as well. You know, at the high end, but they are doing some nice things. But if it takes traction, I'll mark this down as a point in the sand. If they get traction, 5 years from now, we'll be having exactly the same discussion and replace the word Seiko with Citizen.
Sure. Yeah, you're not wrong.
But I feel yes, I'm liking. I mean, I've got a good working relationship with Citizen in the US. They provide me with watches lend me watches to be reviewed. So I always enjoy. Seiko would never contact you, would they? Seiko would never contact a reviewer, I don't think, to ask for them to review a watch. Whereas Casio and Citizen are fantastic with me.
They don't do it, weirdly.
And Citizen has some real quality in the sleepers, even in the low end. Like I have several of theirs. I've got one, I can't remember, it's a perpetual calendar pilot watch. First of all, the second hand hits every one of the minute markers around the thing perfectly. And it has tech in it that I can't even understand how it does it from a perpetual calendar standpoint. And the Nighthawk is a proper GMT. And they never even, like, no one even talks about the fact that it has an independently adjustable hour hand that works wonderfully. And you get this for like a $250 watch. They have amazing tech.
Yeah, and that ProMaster, the Eco Drive Diver that I really like. Still very affordable.
Oh, that's a good one too.
This one. I feels to me like Orient almost disappeared lately. They've got some good. Let's have a look. Actually, let's pull Orient up because they have got some good stuff going on.
And it may be only because it's just fallen out of favor with the YouTuber review.
I think that's
yeah.
it.
I mean,
that's
Yeah,
all.
this
for a
is
long
cracking
for a long
value.
time with Orient, it was all about, it was the starter watch, wasn't it? It was the kind
Yeah,
of
the
first one
Bambino.
to get into the Bambino, yeah. And I think they're just as easy to get these days as they ever were. It's just that it's not quite as in vogue as it was. There's also lots of other options that people have found as well.
Yeah, I really like this. I say Mako, but everyone corrects me and says it's Mako. But I like the and look, they're showing a discount actually on the site, which I don't think Seiko do they?
Citizen actually weirdly do that as well. If you look in
Yeah.
the Citizen site, quite often the official site has got deals on it as well, which is always a bit crazy.
Yeah, look at this for this. I would pick this any day over the SKX. I've had this watch. It's great, $210. And you can usually get them on Amazon for a little bit cheaper. This is a cracking watch with a technically in-house. Well, it is technically in-house, isn't it? It's Seiko owned, and they make the movements.
Yeah. The
Yeah,
bracelets are pretty jangly on them, but other than that, it's a solid watch.
Yeah, they are. I think I had this rubber one, the rubber bracelet, a rubber banded one that I really like the look of, and they do this really quirky. Where's that? There's like a really quirky one, isn't there? Looks a bit like this, but has a lot more going on. But yeah, they do seem to have a lot of fun, and they've started doing a premium. Don't they have a premium Orient Star?
Yes.
Yeah, Orient Star
Orient
as well.
Star, yeah.
I wonder if it's up here.
And those ones are some striking looking watches. Some of those Orient Stars.
Yes, yeah, they're sort of not quite up. I think Mark at Long Island Watches sells the Orients, doesn't he, as well?
Yeah,
so
I think he does.
Get them from a US brand. But yeah, I think it's just that they seem to have fallen out of favor with the YouTubers. In fact, Ben at Ben's Watch Club does them. Maybe I should buy one to review them, because I think actually we've missed Orient, but they are still a value Seiko brand, own brand.
Mm-hmm. And their prices haven't gone crazy as far as I can. They seem right on line with where they've been.
That Mako's been 200 and something for a long time. That was the first ever mechanical watch that I bought that I didn't inherit. That I actually bought with my own money. Was when I was getting into it. Yeah.
But then again, that brand, almost the volume of their sales are probably direct as well.
Yeah, and I bet they do. I bet they must do it. I should say I had my Speedmaster, but the first time when I started watch collecting, was the first one I bought. Okay, so let's have a. So the Limey says, I don't understand why Seiko over the last 15 years didn't make more of an effort in terms of improving the watch, looking at the MM300 and still trying to find a decent strap or deployant. Also, I think the movements haven't really improved, have they? I think they've done a lot case design wise, although they do have some sort of greatest hits that they keep going back to, like the 62 MAS sort of style. One of the other examples I had as well on this sort of pricing thing was I took a lot of stick. I made a video on this watch 2 years ago when they released it. It was $4,600. And
I love that watch.
Yeah, I'll show you on here. I got literally 402 comments. The vast majority of them at the time were telling me I was dead wrong about this watch being overpriced. And then I started seeing comments through at the top where people, because this was limited edition, but people saying that they got it for vastly under RRP. And I noticed even on Chrono 24 for a used one, $2,702. So in the space of you can get them for 2,000 less than.
See, that was a weird one. They did two, if I remember rightly. They did
a dark dial one as well, black dial.
Yeah, there was two. There was like a kind of bluey grey and a black one. I think one was limited,
and with a gilt
one
hands,
wasn't.
I think it had.
And,
I wonder if
that's right. And they're probably some of the nicest quality watches Seiko had made in quite a while. It was immaculately well finished. The quality of them was absolutely exceptional. The straps were great. Everything about it was a great watch. And they just didn't really catch the attention in any real way. They didn't sell in the same way as things like, some of the other SLA models, like the 33 and others, that went absolutely ballistic the minute they launched them. This just did nothing. And I think Seiko had pinned a bit of hope on this one, and it did nothing. So a lot of the retailers had them, and they ended up just binning them out.
Yeah, I think the price. I think this is the first time that they tried to really take the piss with the pricing. I think this was a test of the market because it had the same movement in as the Marine Master, and that was way cheaper, and that was still available at that time. They put a lot into. Oh, we really, I think that there was some sort of special polishing or something they did with the case or a special finishing on it.
Yeah, it's a Ratsu polish, which is typically seen on the Grand Seikos. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did the bezel line up though? That's the question.
Yeah, actually, amazingly, it did.
Oh, okay.
Because in that photo, it's actually not lined up, not dead center anyway. But yeah, I mean, I think part of the reason why I was so upset about this watch when it came out is because I thought that this was probably the ultimate diver that they made at the time. But 4,600 was wild to me. And the thing was that I actually I said in that video that I thought they would sell out 1,300 pieces. But it's amazing to see that they're still available new at that price 2 years later. And I took a lot of stick for it in the comments, but the market kind of vindicated me in the end that I was right because they were readily available for a lot less. Let's have a look. So Alexander says those were produced by the Grand Seiko team. Maybe.
Oh, that could be.
Yeah, it could be. So yeah, well, that was great. I think we've got all of the comments here. I think we're pretty much sorry anyone if I missed anyone in the comment section, but yeah, no, thanks for being so active in the comments. Any last thoughts, panel, on Seiko, other than we
were all over the place.
Yeah, I mean, much like their pricing, much like their range, a bit all over the place. But I think that's one of the beauties though, is because if you look hard enough, you'll always find something pretty cool in their range, and they do. Yeah. There's no rhyme or reason. They can launch a Seiko 5 limited edition or a Seiko 5 special edition or just a certain color, and good luck getting a discount on them. In fact, good luck even getting one because they sell out like that. And then they can release one that's very similar and nobody wants it. It's weird. They're all over the place sometimes in what they do. And actually, it's quite good fun because you're never quite sure which one's going to be the one that's just going to take off. But there is always, every year, they launch some and folk fight over trying to get them. And then there's others that should work and they just don't.
Yeah, and the thing with Seiko, I think why certainly I keep coming back to them is because not the Grand Seiko, but in the normal Seiko range, the case is there's always a lot of thought put into the cases, even though sometimes the bracelets aren't that good, and the dials are always spot on, even though sometimes the bezels are misaligned. But there's just there's a quirkiness to them that is still very lovable.
And who doesn't love a tuna?
I have two.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm going to let Mark take my last word because I agree with him. This is the issue. The issue of the top end Seiko divers don't look much different than the 500 ones. That is spot on.
No, which also says that they're 5 because and there's not really that many bad looking Seikos. Yeah. Frankly, there's the odd one or two for sure, but as a general rule, they're all, especially the divers, they're all really good looking watches as a general rule, and that means that you can buy actually a really inexpensive, good-looking watch, which is not a bad thing.
And it'll last a lifetime. You can beat the
heck out of it. Will. You'll miss every train that you ever go for, but other than that, you'll be fine.
You got to adjust it in the morning.
Yeah. Exactly. Also, some of the lower,
adjust twice a day.
Yeah, some of the lower end Seikos as well. Certainly that I've had. I mean, you only have to say the word magnet and they get magnetized. But, that's my own opinion. Awesome, cool. All right, well, thanks everyone in the comments. A big thanks to the panel, and we'll see you next week on Casual Watch Talk. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Soon.
Bye.